Welcome to the Me Plus Ultra Network, where we explore cutting edge ideas and strategies for driving positive change in business. I'm thrilled to have you join us for today's episode. This is where we're going to dive into a fascinating world of innovation and trend spotting with our guest, John Traver. Joining me as guest host today, it just pains me to say this, is the esteemed Sandy Cerami, better known as the Solutionist. Together, we're going to uncover actionable insights, inspiring stories that are going to empower you on your journey toward creating a meaningful impact. Welcome to the show, Sandy, as always. And John, welcome to the Me Plus Ultra Network.
Scott, Sandy, thanks for having us. You guys look amazing. I feel like we're looking like Blues Brothers today, all in black, men in black.
This wasn't even planned. This is how you know. This is how you know we all share a brain and we're synced.
Actually, I had a light-colored coat on, and I was looking at these guys backstage. I'm like, Traver, you look like an idiot. Take the jacket off, go black. So anyway, there you go.
You know what they say, John?
Yes. Don't say it, Sandy. Don't say it.
Right out of the open gate, right in the most important part of the live stream, the opening part. He comes right in with.
I had to blow up the esteemed comment. I mean, nobody's buying that one, buddy.
For those of you out there watching this, you see, I mean, this is why I ask you to pray for me often. These guys right here, you know, I need much prayer, right? Mm-hmm. No, these are two special dudes. These guys are special in our space. I was just telling them offline that the role that they played with a couple of the initiatives they built, and I think we might talk about it today, is meaningful. And if it didn't exist, I think there'd be a void. So, hey, man, I'm really excited to be here with you guys.
Well, we appreciate you as always. Go ahead, Sandy.
No, I say back at you, JT. I mean, you know, I have what I call the Mount Rushmore of automotive, and you know, there's a spot there for JT. We've had quite a run, Scott. Like the last 3 episodes, I missed the Dave Boyle episode because I was on the road traveling with clients, but I've been able to be here for the last 2, and now with JT, 3 killer guests and friends on the podcast. So just.
I told Dave. I told Dave you've made every single episode but his.
Right, exactly. Thank you. Appreciate you rubbing salt in the wound. Thank you.
Are you guys talking about Spisak? You talking about Spisak?
No, David Boyle.
Oh, sweet, awesome.
Yeah. So you know, I met John through Dave. Mm-hmm. So I got that. You know, we've talked a lot of episodes, especially on these live streams, about relationship building and networking. You know, it's funny how you don't think back because, you know, we've known each other for a few years now, but, you know, I was down there on the old podcast, interviewing Dave, and he goes, "Oh man, I've got a good friend. He'd be a perfect guest for you." And he introduced me to John, and then down on that same trip, we did both of those shows actually.
Mm-hmm. Well, I owe you a debt of gratitude because I knew of John, but didn't really have any insight as to the type of person and the caliber of person that John is. And after watching him on your podcast, I made it a point. Ron and I hopped on a bird, flew down to Texas, had no business being there other than we just wanted to meet John Traver. And that is the God's honest truth. We flew to Texas specifically to meet with John and to buy him dinner and to spend time with him. And I will tell you, it was one of the best decisions that I've ever made in my life. And I consider John to be one of the 2 or 3 people that I can call or reach out to when I'm not sure what to do or who to call. John Traver is my guy in that regard for sure.
Yeah. I will say that was one of that initial episode, and we've done a couple since that, John, but you were talking about a world of knowledge in business, but I don't like to say but because I feel like it negates what I just said, but you're even better person. And so, you know, that's a high bar to jump over, buddy. That's a high bar to jump over. So we got Squire Pettis coming in here saying, "Looking good, everyone." And I want to encourage everyone, when we stream live, we're streaming out to YouTube, to LinkedIn, to Facebook, to X, on all the different channels. And you guys can stream live on your channels as well. I gave it that capability, but it's a new feature here on StreamYard, so I don't know exactly how that works. But
sure,
I encourage everyone to either comment. You can ask questions while we're doing this, depending on what platform you're coming in from. I know I get LinkedIn comments. I see those. I've seen Facebook and I believe YouTube. I don't know if we'll get the X comments or not. But if they are, we try to put them on the screen. If you got questions, we'll try to answer them. If we don't get to you, it's just simply because StreamYard didn't pull it into the comment section.
Right.
So we're not skipping over you. We'll get back to you later tonight when we get back on our social channels and get out of our day-to-day operations. But let's dive right in, John. Let's for the people who don't know you, we've got a great topic today, and I want to make sure though people understand why they should be listening to you, because you've accomplished quite a lot. Share a little bit about your background, your journey in the business world, and then we'll kind of take it from there.
Okay. Well, I thought about this a little bit as you prepped me. And I think one of the first things I think of is when I was a kid. I was about 12 years old. My dad encouraged me to start my own business. It was a small engine repair business. The receipts didn't amount to much, guys. I mean, it was, I don't even know, a few $100 a year for a few years. But the concept, the impression, it made on me was important. That makes me think of a guy that God put in my path a few years ago. We were doing some renovation at our house, and we were doing hardwood floors, and Dawn had everything going down at the house. It was like peeling the onion back, as the mafia say. It was painful, right? And in walks Antonio Salas and his dad, Tony, and they were doing hardwood floors. And this young man had lemonade stand written all over him. And it kind of reminded me of me at 12. Now, he was not 12, he was 20, 21, but he just peppered me with questions. And I loved it. I love the fact that he thought the way he did. Or Nick Ogleby, who's dialed in right now. This guy has done turf around the world for some famous PGA guys, some big time PGA courses.
Oh, nice.
This guy just was on death's door with a very, very serious medical condition, and he's on the mend and doing well, but he's got lemonade stand written all over him. So probably nothing different than most of us that have found our way into that part of the space. My automotive career began in 1986, as you guys know, Wild Dodge in Waukesha, Wisconsin. And I was paying my way through school. I didn't see myself in the car business. Definitely didn't see myself selling. It was a skill set that seemed awkward to me. But that was the beginning. One of the things I remember about that journey that would sort of set my career up was I was sort of a water boy, if you will, in a way. And let me explain. Chrysler would roll out these workshops where you had to send somebody. So on the sales side, I'd always raise my hand. I was like, yeah, I'll go. I kind of wanted to understand what I was doing. And I think that's sort of how I'm wired. I like to understand how things work together. And so, but what would happen is they would have to do service and parts. Well, I wasn't in service and parts. I was in sales. But guys, in the first year, I went to probably 20 workshops for Chrysler. By the end of the first year, I pretty much had a macro for the whole operation. It wasn't a plan. It was just like Traver will go. I was Mikey. They might as well call me. Remember the old Life cereal, right? Let's ask Mikey. He'll eat anything, or right?
I don't.
I don't. Wrote that note down.
I don't, but Sandy might remember that commercial. I don't remember that.
He's in form, people.
John, they say the one that fires the first shot usually catches the most return bullets.
That's good. The cool thing is I know I'll see him soon. So, that's, that it's all good. So from there, I sold and, started out selling. My first week, I didn't sell a thing. I had a guy named Dick Hatnauer, who was my GSM, paged me in sales office, basically challenged my manhood. And that kind of cranked me off. It sort of lit the fuse. And the guy was so disrespectful to people, and he truly was. And I hope he's cleaned it up, but in my mind, I was thinking, gosh, if this guy can run one of these, I got to figure out how to own one of these. I mean, that's how attitudinal I was as a young guy. I didn't say it, but I definitely thought it, So anyway, that education helped, because then I was hired as director of corporate training for the Russ Darrow Group. And Russ was very well respected, polished, not your typical dealer per se. And again, at that time, there was a lot of good business people in automotive, but you still had some of the old guard that, you kind of had to feel out. And Russ was one of the good guys. So worked out of the corporate office. He had 10 or 12 stores.
He turned out to have a decent career.
Yeah, he did. Yeah. Yeah, he did. Do you want to highlight that? You want to talk about that?
If you go ahead, man, go. If it's relevant to what we're going to be talking about, go.
Well, I'm talking Daddy Russ, right?
Yeah.
And he ran for Senate at one point.
Right.
He didn't win, but he probably could have. Russ was amazing. I'll tell you something. Russ, there were some basic things he taught me that have just stuck with me. One was I wrote a brand new hiring and training program for all our salespeople for all the stores. And I kind of went outside the box a little bit in how you typically would do it. He gave me the country club at West Bend to use for the training. So I really had their attention. And then he told me, he said, okay, now here's what I want to know. I want to know what the turnover is. You track them for the first 6 months. You show me the turnover. And what he hammered home in me was that everything I did, he said, anything you spend as a resource here, you got to measure. You have to measure, or you can't spend it. And that stayed with me. My first tagline for Traver Technologies, the company I would build for BDC, was training results, and it had a period, and it said period, and then it had period. That was our tagline, our sales line. So it shows you how much of an impact that made on me. I just feel like there's an accountability that a lot of people may be tempted to dodge, and when in fact there's actually freedom in those, sort of understanding the system and putting yourself within that system and staying true to it. Russ helped me with that. So that was a great experience. I do remember during that time, we had a GM who had some Irish in him. East Coast guy, ran the Toyota store. They hired him, found a recruiter. The Toyota store was in a horrible location. It was the smallest store. It was a one-car showroom. The showroom floor ceiling tile leaked. It was an old 1966 gas station. Anyways, they blow Jim out, the guy. And Russ taps me. He's like, hey, I need you to run this thing on an interim basis. So guys, if you guys were general managers for the other stores, I'm working with you all the time, right? So I'm a young guy, and I already knew the unwritten code. You know what the unwritten code is. All right, let's see if he can actually just do this.
Yep.
Yeah.
Right. And I knew that in my head. Now, I would work Saturdays at your stores. I would go work the desk. I'd take turns. So I had your respect. But this is a little different. Now it's out in a little bit deeper end of the pool. Well, the problem was I was at an extreme disadvantage. I mean, all kinds of reasons, right? Inventory, product in West Bend at that time. Toyota wasn't a thing. It was a domestic market back then. And so I needed the phones. And that's where I really went from knowing that this was important to, okay, actually, this is going to be our offense. So when we do be-back calls, we're going to change completely how we do it. First of all, we're going to log information completely different. I'm going to protect the salespeople in a different way. I was just closer to the fire. So one of the pieces of advice I would give to anybody in business is don't be afraid to get close to the fire. Another way to say it is get your hands in the dirt. You're going to learn more in the front end. We had executive committee meetings here yesterday for our C-suite for Traver companies. So a couple COOs, couple technical people, et cetera, CFO. And we got on this theme. And we all agreed that if we were just hired today to run one of these businesses, the first place we would start would be in our training program and then on the phones. And that would be the easiest way to guide our organization by really understanding what's happening up front. So that happened at Russ Darrow. Fortunately, things went well. Pat Schmidt or Lenny Schmidt and Pat Ryan came into the market with ADC, and it was Automotive Development Center. Dave O'Brien, Quantum 5. So Dave O'Brien worked for them. He was a trainer, and they wanted to hire me. I went to Russ. He's like, hey, I think it could be a good fit. They had just bought the Key Royal training program, and Key Royal was like the New Testament, of training, if you remember. And guys, no offense, but and probably I don't know what it was, but I looked at it, and I looked at our sales process as an industry, and it was very outdated. It was still a throw the keys on the roof kind of market, as you guys remember, right? And
Scott does. I don't know what you're talking about, JT.
Okay. For those that don't know, seriously though, there are some people listening that don't know. So back then, if you brought your car in as a trade and you would give us your keys so we could have somebody drive it, now our used car manager has the keys. Now we have numbers in front of you. You don't like the numbers. You want your keys back. And then we start telling you, we've misplaced your keys, but we're going to find, by the way, we're still making some calls, see if we can't get some more money. And for me, that was garbage. I had no problem asking for more money if I could justify it and just tell you. And I felt like I could earn your respect and your trust, and I could back it up with facts. But the way they wanted you to do it was just, it wasn't how I just couldn't get there. So Key Royal, I looked at their training. I know you want to say something. Key Royal, I looked at their training, and guys, it was just as old. Like most of the scripts and the stuff they were teaching, if I could, would you? What's it going to take? And I'm going, I don't want to teach this. So that was the second next step towards me starting Traver Technologies and the Business Development Center. But Scott, you want to jump in and say something?
Well, we're on a little bit on sales training here, and I always told my people I want them to be high pressure salespeople.
I've always felt that.
But here's what I mean by it, because that always gets taken wrong. I want them to do such a good job being sincere and really doing what's right by the client that there's tremendous trust built, and you're really hitting on the things that either the client wants to move towards or away from, and you've demonstrated that this is the right product, that it creates so much internal pressure in the client that the close is easy, right? There's a difference between internal pressure and what you're describing with the keys, external pressure. It's one of the reasons I feel horrible every time I go over to the Cerami household. I pull open his desk drawer and it's full of keys.
Those just kidding. It's the lock, so Mary can't get out of the house and leave me.
Yeah, that's right. His are personal. That's right. His are personal house keys. It's the reason he stayed married for so long.
The extra set.
No, well, funny, Scott, what you don't know is that my best man's last name was Hull and Mary's matron of honor was Dobbs. Which, if you know what I'm talking about, John knows that's exactly the system that they used to use in order to get people to basically give up and give in.
Man, it's just unbelievable that those techniques were taught. It just blows me away. I come from, so you brought up a lot of people where you learned from. So for me, John, what I got out of that, especially early on, is you love learning. Mm-hmm. All right. And so you talked about your first job and you'd go off on the Chrysler stuff. You love absorbing that knowledge. You like challenging your mind. Right. And so for me, my first exposure outside of the typical dealership training was Anthony Robbins. He sent in one of his reps in to some local dealers, and we watched like a 5-minute clip of one of his, and I was like, yeah, I want to learn that stuff. And then, man, from then on,
walking on coals, baby.
I poured in, and so I'm biased towards him because I feel like I dove in so much and there was so much frequency in what I was doing that, it becomes subconscious to you. And so I probably could have had a variety of different sales trainers that were equally as powerful or as good. But I think a lot of it is how committed are you to really taking it, learning it, and applying it? Like I could go to Sandy, he could teach me just as much. but how am I committed to learning? How much am I committed to taking what he's teaching me, right, and really using it and making sure it's like breathing?
Well, it's funny because when JT is talking about, looking at the whole Dobbs methodology and looking at Key Royal and the way it was so antiquated and not based on really the best experience for the client or the people that are actually, carrying out the process. JT, you innovate in a way that I've had a number of conversations with you around this topic. You innovate by first seeking to improve. Like, you don't innovate for the sake of innovating. You innovate because the goal is to improve. And you have this incredible way of breaking things down. And I want you to go into that a little bit in terms of the Key Royal exposure, and then looking at it and say, we could do better. You break down, and then you will stay with something to your own, to your credit, and based on your own assertion, you'll stay with a problem longer until you can figure out how to turn around and re-engineer a process so that it delivers the result that you're looking for. Can you talk about how you use the Key Royal and the whole Dobbs to break down and then recreate what you did, which the Traver Technologies piece?
Great question.
Yeah. So you're talking like spotting innovation or
well, how you look at, like, when you see something's broken, like you saw with Key Royal and just outdated, what is your process for going through innovating and bringing something that's re-engineered, redesigned, or something new to the marketplace?
How do you spot the trends? How do you spot the opportunities, right? And then how do you innovate through them?
Mm-hmm. I think anyone can do this if we slow down enough. So Tim Keller, in a podcast, it was a lesson, a Bible lesson on certainty was the message. And he said, you have to doubt your doubts. So I'm going to use that to tee this up. So the first key is you have to doubt your doubts. Let me explain. So if somebody's absolutely certain, or they're totally, there's no way this could be true, right? What they're really saying is, I adhere to something else I believe absolutely. Does that make sense? They're not really speaking about what they don't believe. Indirectly, they're saying, I believe this more. I'm hanging on this more.
Yeah.
So the thing is, all three of us have kids. And there's a foolishness we all are born with, right? And some of us hang on to it a little longer from what I hear. So the job of a parent is to drive foolishness out, right? So in business, you're also trying to do the same thing. You're trying to say, is this wise? Does this make sense? Does this have longevity? This is real simple stuff. So you look at this sales process, for example. So for one of the things I saw that was a problem was we were turning over salespeople left and right. I was personally part of hiring those people. I sourced those people. I can tell you their life story. What the heck are we turning them over? I'll tell you why they're turning over. Because they were making a living on fresh showroom ups. People that closed at a very low rate, that grossed as minis, okay? Because they have no rapport. And so what I saw was this broken, and then I saw a Foursquare system, somebody just said a minute ago, I think Squire said, up to, talking about payments, this language that was so adjunct and outdated and impersonal. And yeah, Squire, I saw you, brother. And you're absolutely right. And so, it's like, that's the beginning of it. So then the next question is, guys, what would be ideal? What would be ideal? What's needed here? What do they expect? There in the Western world that we live in, I think this is easier than it is in other parts of the world. And you say, why? I think it's because it's easier to unpack. It's easier to identify the components. If I'm teaching auto mechanics class, I'm probably not starting with PowerPoint. I'm probably starting a shop, and I'm gonna say, hey, grab me a 3/4 inch ratchet socket with a ratchet. And that kid might say, what's a ratchet? Great, here we go. Now, if I start up on the screen and I'm teaching it in concept, it's going to take me a while. Okay. So I think that first piece, I don't know if this is enough of an answer for you, but it's not that hard if you loosen your grip on what you believe is absolutely true or absolutely false. This is how we did. This is how we do it. That's kind of a red light for me.
Oh,
like that's a bit of a red light. Like, bro, Now, if you're close to me, like these two guys are, or a couple of you that are dialed in today that are close to me, you guys will all be honest and say, we've had conversations where it's like, but to me, that's what real friends are. Like if I don't ever say it now, if I don't know you that well, I'm not going to invite myself into your living room on that conversation unless you ask me. To me, that's just decorum. But if we're close, one of the things implied in that friendship is, bro, you can speak into my life. And by the way, these two guys, they do that with me. They'll say stuff to me offline where there's not an audience. Hey, you need to be thinking about this. And they know I'm listening for that. I don't have all the answers, but what I want to do at the end of the day is whatever we do, we want to do it well. And then once you're doing that, guess what? If you truly are doing it well, you get to decide how big you are. You get to decide how far you go. But if you're not doing it well, you understand you have no decision to make at all. So
that's a fact. John, you know what resonates with me is something you just said. Like I'm hearing Vince Lombardi and I'm hearing John Wooden. This is a football, and gentlemen, we're going to learn how to tie our shoes. That's how they started every single season. Every season in and season out, regardless of whether you were a rookie or a 10-year veteran or a senior in their graduating year, it didn't matter. They started the same way every single year. They made no assumptions about what people knew or understood, and they used it as an opportunity to remind those that already knew about the things they knew they should be doing to begin with.
That Lombardi story, I'm a Green Bay Packer. I bleed green, right? I love the Pack. And Joe Link, God bless you. Good luck with your Bears this year. Our National Director of Business Development.
Go Bears.
Joe is awesome. Anyways, when I'm down and out, he'll be kicking me in the mouth. I know it. So anyways, he wears it right now. So Lombardi, the Packers had lost for 10 years in a row. They were horrible. Bart Starr, 17th round pick. He calls his wife. He's like, honey, we're going to win. And she's like, what changed? She's like, this guy's different. That year, they get to the postseason. The next year, they get to the championship game. They have a lead in the fourth quarter. They lose. The next year is when that speech was made for the first time. He starts the year out and he says, gentlemen, this is a football.
Yep.
Context matters. So what I mean by that is the guys were thinking, how are we going to take it up another level? And what Lombardi was saying, hey, guys, you have everything you need. Yep. You got to execute on what we got.
Amen.
And they won it. And they won the first one, and they won the second one. And, of course, then he goes to Washington and cancer, and he goes home. But, I mean, I love learning from stories like that, buddy. And your theme of what you just said is absolutely on point.
Well, you stole it from us, JT, to be completely honest. Let's go a little deeper into history books. He came out of the Giants organization. Giants missed that opportunity. And even deeper, he coached football at my father's alma mater, St. Cecilia's High School.
No kidding.
Oh, yeah. My grandfather was friendly with Mr. Lombardi. Yeah.
You had Landry and Lombardi in New York.
That's fact.
Yeah.
Let's not forget that he had a lot of help from a local Louisville legend in Paul Horning.
All right. That's fact.
Dude, I didn't know he was Louisville.
Oh, yeah. Oh, yeah.
Wow.
Oh, yeah.
Now I see the similarity with you and him.
After he went to Notre Dame and after, oh yeah, let me tell you something. He liked his bourbon, and he would be at the
didn't
track.
You have a funny story about when you and Paul graduated high school together?
Him and my dad. So he'd be at the track all the time. After he retired and stuff like that. So for the last 30 years of his life, you could catch him at where we go to the Derby, the turf club there. He's there all the time. I mean, almost daily. It was great.
Wow.
So, and very nice guy. So let me ask you this question. So I think no matter what business vertical you're in, there are common challenges we all face, but I'm going to take this as to more of the topic on the show, right? I also think there's probably trends that are kind of universal. What are some of the I guess key trends that you're currently spotting in the business world?
First of all, I think of a great Peter Drucker quote. He was a 1909 to 2004 guy-ish. So think about what he saw, godfather of big business. He said, pay attention to the bend in the trend. Pay attention to the bend in the trend. Anytime, okay, you get it. Anytime you talk about trends, okay, some of the bends that I see right now, guys, one is AI. Okay.
Oh yeah.
Have you guys heard of AI? By the way, it's spelled A. Oh, anyway. Okay.
Alan
We digress.
Yes.
What's in my opinion,
Sandy's memory has gone to the point, you know, when you go into ChatGPT and the button says, give me my morning routine, Sandy has to click that just so he knows what to do now.
Are you on 04? Are you on version 04, Sandy? Because it'll do it for you, I think.
I am, but I gotta tell you, I called Scott 2 weeks ago. I said, Scott, refresh my memory. How do you spell AI? I'm still waiting for his answer.
That's what I'm saying. I'm here to help you. I'm from the government, and I'm here to help you.
Right.
Okay. So anyways, we're off the rails, guys. You need to get your act together. Okay. So AI, again, this is one guy's opinion. That's it. I'm wrong by 5:30 in the morning. Okay. So I screw up every day, but this is how I'm seeing it right now. What's working in AI is what I would call integrated AI. And I'm going to peel this back for a sec. It's a trend. What's not working so well is what I would call frontline AI. So what's the difference? So frontline to me is, oh, hey, for like we take service calls as an example. Hey, let's have AI just take service calls.
Yeah.
Okay. Okay. You heard Scott's tone. If we're really being honest, 100% of calls, yes or no? Is it working or not? Red, yellow, green. Let's start there. Is it green? If we're being optimistic, would we call it yellow? Or is it maybe borderline red? Orange. I can tell you what I'm hearing. I had the largest publicly traded automotive company here yesterday. I had one of the top 3 largest OEMs here last week. I'm just telling you guys, real talk. So what is it's not. I got calls over the last handful of years. Hey, let's do AI. Let's do AI. You got all these calls. And I said, look, here's my gut. My gut says it's going to work for about 1/3 of the calls. But there's 2/3 are like, hey, bro, the reason I'm calling, I'm trying to actually talk to somebody. Okay. So, there's that. Does that mean it'll never work? No, that's not the question. The question is, what's the trend? The trend is integrated AI. So like where I see it working in that particular area is in kind of underneath the hood in certain processes, maybe sourcing the parts, maybe handling the status updates, right? And it's buried where it's a more predictable workflow or SOW, statement of work. So one trend there, and I see this even talking to VCs, venture capital groups, you know, and occasionally they'll just want an opinion, and the phone will ring, and we're having this conversation, and I'm just from a grassroots standpoint, that's where I'm seeing it in our spaces really make headways. Another trend is BPO. What is BPO? BPO is business process outsourcing. I would say to you, if you have a business or you can build a business that can be done as well or better remotely, it's not required to be done in that business for less, it's worth building. The key is if I come to Scott and say, hey, Scott, you know, I can do this for you, or Sandy, I can do this for you, but it's 1/3 of the cost or half of the cost or 1/4 of the cost. The only question they have is, does it suck or is it decent?
Right, exactly.
Right? And if I can show you that it's the equivalent or better, if I can elicit from them anything close to they're as good as us, or real talk, they're better than us. Half the time they're better than us. Then it is a business model. It's happening. So the reason I say BPO is trending up, I'm seeing it in multiple spaces, is because of margin compression. So one of our companies is in the self-storage space, and our team, okay, I want to tell you, I got to brag on my squad there. Our squad, Jennifer and Shannon and Andy and Sherry and Curtis and Chance and Hav, and forgive me for those I haven't mentioned. What these guys have done as a team in the last window of time is they have expanded how they interact remotely with self-storage. And we're in thousands of properties US. So it used to be payments and tenant support, gate codes, but it just kept evolving today where we move people in, we move people out. We rent people, do the full documentation, process the paperwork, close the deal. It'd be like inked paper in automotive. Yep. Okay. So what that does, if we own a handful of properties, the amount of personnel we need to have on payroll can be reduced. It doesn't mean we don't have a hub. We don't have still somebody who touches it, checks gates, makes sure fences aren't cut, whatever. But we don't have to have as many people. And in self-storage, your hours are so elongated, the amount of payroll you got to have is a problem. So it's a cap rate game. And so every business, when you begin to break it down, take it apart, tinker with it, you'll see that margin compression. So BPO is another trend. And I think the third I would mention, just for grins, is in the VC space, in the venture capital space. It used to be SaaS, and I'm not saying it's not SaaS. So SaaS is software as a service, and your margins are very high, usually 70% gross margins. Tech-enabled service offerings, tech-enabled. So not straight service, but tech-enabled service offerings have flat out picked up steam. They see the connection because it ties back to what I just said with BPO. So there's a few: AI, BPO, VC. I don't know if that helps, but those are bends in the trend.
I've been dancing this dance with a potential strategic partner on our end in RPA. I don't know how familiar you are with RPA. A lot of times it gets confused with AI. It's not the same thing, but robotic process automation. We're looking at ways to utilize that in automotive, because it is really an automotive centric application. And so when you're talking and I'm listening to you, I'm saying to myself, you just actually opened up my eyes to something I had missed in these conversations with this gentleman he's kind of been in and out of the conversation with me. But you said it perfectly. Integrated, I think is the thing that everybody has to understand. Integrated versus, as you said, the frontline piece, right? The frontline piece is always going to be very difficult to duplicate a real human to human interaction, like a legit one. Okay. I guess as we get further out with AI, maybe they'll solve for that X. I don't know, but I still think that human beings are going to want to deal with other human beings in certain circumstances where AI is just never going to replace. Would you agree or disagree?
I would agree. I think you could build a business case on just that. However, I think there would be some in the room that would fight you and I on that opinion. And I would hold our belief loosely, and I would welcome that discussion, because I think it's still going to end up being true, is what I'm saying. It's like, we can argue about the reason. The bottom line, though, is, hey, guys, this is going to still have to happen. Right.
So the way I look at it is, let's take it. If we're in sales, right, and we're selling someone, at some point we're going to do a needs, wants analysis or a qualifying at some point, right? And a lot of those initial questions are very easy to answer, especially the first few are very easy to answer for the prospect or client to answer. And, we would define them here as diagnostic questions, right? They're pretty, they can answer them like this. It doesn't involve a lot of thought. I want to get the client kind of in a rhythm and build a little momentum. He's answering questions, and then I'll dive and I'll start peeling that onion back a little bit, right? And finding the real stuff. To me, AI, if it's on my website or if it's handling certain questions, I want to use AI if it's just simple. I don't want to talk to someone. What are your hours? When's the best time?
Right.
Just simple things like that. But if I got to have a conversation that requires, I know, for instance, when I call into a business and I got the automated, I guess, phone stuff, let's call it, say I'm calling American Express or whatever. if I know I've got a question that is going to require a human being, I don't want to go through that tree. I don't want to have to go through that process. I just hit 0. Get me to somebody live, because I don't have time to waste on all this stuff. Right. And so I think it's the deeper you go, the more human interaction is not just required, but wanted by the client. And I think the surface level
desired
stuff,
by the client, it's required.
correct.
If it's desired, it's required.
And I think the surface level stuff, move on. I think it's great for that stuff. It saves the company time, and it probably saves the client time. As long as, by the way, as long as while you're doing all this surface level, easy to answer stuff with the AI, there's always a quick out to go to a human.
Not always.
That's right.
Yeah, I think there should be, is what I'm saying.
Yeah,
in other words, that is, to me, and I think that aligns with what you're saying, John.
I want to ask JT a question to clarify something, JT, because you talk about the bend in the trend, right? Which I love. I just wrote that down. I'm taking notes as you're talking, as usual. Could we describe a return to the human aspect of client and guest and customer service as being a bend in the trend potentially? Because I will tell you from my own experience, I rent from Hertz when I'm on the road traveling with clients. I am disgusted to the point where I'll never rent from them again. I've made my last rental because you cannot get a human being on the phone with Hertz. Everything is automated. Everything is AI, and everything is based on digital messaging. I can't speak to a real live human being, and it's cost them a client in Sandy Cerami. Now they're not going to go out of business because I'm not renting with them anymore. But if enough people have that experience and say, I'm out, it becomes a poor business decision. Even though you're showing a initial bottom line savings, you're going to lose clients, and you lose your top line, which keeps you alive in the first place.
I have to defend Hertz. I love them. That's my rental car of choice. This is before my clients started offering to just pick me up and drive me around. But Sandy's in a different situation. But Sandy, through Amex, Hertz will pick you. Like when I come off the plane, they shoot me a text, and literally they bring my car to the baggage claim, and they find their own. I never have to go to the rental center. It comes right to me, and they drop me off at the curb.
Yeah, I'm going to let JT answer the question without calling you a complete smug elitist.
Do you guys see why Scott has us? We're trying to we do our best to keep him grounded, folks. We do our best.
JT, anyway, what do you think about that? Do you think like what's old is new again in terms of client handling?
What I think in that case, this is an example of doubt your doubts, or be careful of your certainties. Maybe would be the opposite way of saying that. Certainty would be, you and I are at Hertz, we're in the executive team, we make this decision, we margin compression, we thin out overhead, we automate process. So a guy like Scott is really pleased with a text message and a card that shows up. But what I would say to you is this: you got to measure, you got to stay close. And so you got to ask openly, is it working? I'll give you an example. There's this initiative in automotive called EV. I don't know if you guys have heard of it, but electric vehicles. And it came as a mandate, and it came on fast. And if you trace it, you can see where it showed up. And then you got all kinds of questions you can ask yourself. And that's okay. Look, that's okay. But here's the bottom line. Real talk is, you see a pivot now. You see the word hybrid being brought back in. You see this over sort of aggressive play, and you have consumers at the end of the day, the ones that write the checks, that they spit on some of the opportunities they had. Now, is EV bad? I didn't say that.
Nope.
I didn't say that. The question is EV for everybody? Is EV for everybody right now? And apparently, based on current polling, the answer is not yet. Okay. And that there's some reason for pause. So to me, that's the beta testing of an idea. That's where, if we get too heavy in our own opinion, then to me, it moves closer to an agenda than it does something that's more of a received offering that actually is a fit. for a space. So what you and I do is different than governmental stuff. Thank God. They'd shoot me the first week in office, but I tell my family that all the time, but that's okay. Again, out here, I'm trying to serve the people that we're interacting with. And how do I do that? I have to understand what they need. And then how do we do that well? What do they want? How do I do that well? And that's the balancing act that's going on. You're balancing all the things of innovation and change with progress, continuity. Part of continuity is cash flow. It's one thing if Jamil calls you, Scott, and say, "Hey, man, we just signed a bunch of deals. We signed this group, that group. Listen, we're gonna lose 6 digits for the next 6 months, but anyways, we're growing." Hold on a sec. What happened? Yep. Right. So that's the continuity part that people have to. You're balancing the two. I'm doing this in generalities because I'm trying to think of all the different types of people in our discussion. If we were sitting at a BB&C event, we could tighten this up even more. But I think you guys agree in general that
absolutely.
This is not a hard question. There's Jamil. How you doing, brother? Just covering for you, man. Just trying to bump Scott for you any way I can.
So he had a comment down here. This is the type of abuse that I have to take on a regular basis.
Do you see that, Jamil? If I traveled like Scott, the company would never see. I'm going to second that motion. Sandy?
JT, all I can tell you is the abuse Scott experiences by invitation only.
All right. He has a great question, though. What are some of the great tools or technologies that you'd recommend for business owners out there that's been a game changer for your business?
Okay. So think about it, 2 of the 3 businesses. Okay. So one of the businesses that I'm in is agriculture. So there it's equipment related, and that there is technology. So what I try and do there is we look for areas that are costly. Like, for example, if you're making 2-string bales, you don't want to have somebody in the field picking those up. Like, those days are long gone. So there's a $150,000 machine that is behind the baler. It's called a bale baron, big red machine. And the bale never touches the ground. And it goes from the baler, travels into this bale baron. Now, the bale baron is a merchandising machine. So it can take and put these, think of it as like, you want a 6-pack, you want a 12-pack, like that. It'll take them up to 21 bale bundles. So, and then it puts 400 gauge twine, which is real thick, 4 times over this big bundle. And you got, in ours, it's 18 bales. Well, that bundle of 18 bales is 1,150 pounds. 1 grapple touches it. 2 are stacked. It walks right into a trailer, and it fits with a foot of margin on each side. And it goes right to a store. So that's an example of technology. Now, how do you find that technology? So Jamil's question is very specific for J&L, but you can learn a lot by looking at businesses outside of yours. So what I was looking at is, I'm like, there's no way we're going to have, does that make sense? So, okay. So
love it.
So I like to start there because people want to spit on that and go, okay, we're going to talk ag. Yeah, we're going to talk ag. We're going to talk. And by the way, Shane Swinson, our general manager, he's that guy that if you meet you and you're a hard worker, and I had to place a bet. The only bet I could place, no matter how much I thought of you, would be you may work as hard as him, but you'll never outwork the guy. He's that guy. And so with him, he and I are this perfect blend because we do chase work smarter, but we don't say not harder. We want to take the edge off of it because hard is an advantage too. There's this, and it's not hard like it's straight uphill, but it's more like persistence. Just how did you guys build that wall? 1 brick at a time. Do the day. Do it well. This is very simple stuff. So no shortcuts. But Jamil, the other thing I would tell you, buddy, is I remember when you were going through the software conversion piece, and what that told me is you were looking at bales that were hitting the field, basically, right, in terms of accounting, and you wanted more of a real-time view. So for us, I'll give you an example. Look at your administrative systems that you have today. So when you onboard a new client, if you're large enough where you need to have all parts of your business talking to each other and seeing where that client is in their journey in real time. So maybe there's an onboarding process. Maybe there's a go live process. So for us, we've written our own software for decades, but we got to a place where we've outgrown some of the systems we have. And back in the day, I was not a Salesforce guy. It was a bloated technology, had barrier to entry. I had to offer up my first 3 children. It was just super expensive, all this. And I'm like, I saw it from a mile away and it passed. But today, it's an $80 to $165 seat license, depending on how much you buy. By the way, they bought Tableau. Who's Tableau? Tableau, think of Tableau as like SQL for dummies. So it takes the data and charts and graphs it. Okay, so there's a migration process that we are considering around Salesforce Tableau that should take us into the next 10 years if we and we have some alternatives other than that. But I use that because I know you guys will relate to that. So that's one of the options we have. So why is that important? Well, because a business is really a few things, but it's a human organization first. And then it's a set of systems. And where we all go to work is we all talk about process. But I listen to this part first. And I just ask them. I just say, what do you need? What do you need? What's not working? Now, if they move into heavy complain mode, I'm usually the traffic, crossing guy. Like, hey, seriously, I don't know, somebody put complaint department above my door, but tell me who it was because we got to take that sign down, right? What I want to hear is ideas on how to fix it.
Yes.
I welcome the frustration. I'm okay with that so long as they're coming packing heat. Right. Like, hey, I know what we need to do, John. We got to do this. Talk to me. Tell me.
Like Junior Soprano said, next time you come see me, come heavy.
That's it. That's it. That's it. So we want to fix it. We want to be better. Is there a culture of improvement? Sometimes impatience will set in when you start chasing these tools. I think the rule of thumb there is, I usually call it the Titanic rule. You guys know the Titanic rule. You've heard me say it before. It's going to take you farther than you want to go. It's going to cost you more than you want to pay. And it's going to keep you longer than you want to stay. Right? Most initiatives are like getting on the Titanic. It's like, dang, I thought this was just a 1-week trip. I thought this was going to be done in 6 months. We're about ready to have a birthday. Holy cow, this thing costs twice as much, but we're still not finished. So that's sort of when Buffett looks at businesses. If you've ever looked at pro formas, real full pro formas, you got 3 columns. Worst case scenario. And this is the worst possible amount of sales we would have, worst possible expenses, worst possible net income. Expected case, that's the middle. This is what we're going to do pretty much. I mean, you got to be good to screw this up. And then best case scenario, this is the opportunity. Buffett said, I've never bought a business on anything but left-hand book for those in the car business. Left-hand book. In other words, worst case. I don't even look at the others. I start worst case. Yep. Now, there's some wisdom there, right? Where you look at that and go, okay. So anyways, I'll shut up. That's too much.
No, JT, I think you're spot on with that. If you can make that business make sense, looking at it from a worst case scenario, expecting the worst case scenario, and then planning for best case, it makes all of your decisions filter through a lens that reduces the potential for making a catastrophically bad decision.
I will tell you something else it does. It makes you think more resourcefully up front.
Oh my God, yeah.
Where you still have time. So it's like if you're a suitor, I'm a suitor, and I'm looking at your deal, Sandy, okay, let me ask you a couple of things. If this ends up being worst case minus 20%, how much of a cash shortfall are you going to have?
Right.
Well, if you can't answer that question, okay, then I have to reassess and say, I'm comfortable with that. I'm not comfortable. If you say, actually, we could miss that by 50% and still not miss a beat. Yep. Okay, those are 2 different answers, guys.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, I think, John,
it's a great answer to risk assessment and management in terms of when it comes to decision making.
Yeah, and I also think it speaks to a lot of times what innovation is born from. It's not always born from opportunity, although we'd like to believe that because that is the most Hollywood-like scenario. But a lot of times innovation is born out of absolute necessity, where if you don't innovate, you die. Okay. And so, Scott, you've always said to me there's so many lessons I learned from Scott. I know we break each other's chops, but the two that have always stuck with me was the one that we look outside of our own vertical or industry for solutions that can be applicable. And John, you alluded to that just a couple of minutes ago. And the second thing is, if I was going to put my own business out of business, what would I be doing today? And so, you create that perceived level of necessity to innovate on the prospect that you may be put out of business by somebody else. So you might as well be the one innovating or out innovating your own business instead of being out innovated by a potential competitor.
So I love that. I absolutely love that question. If I had to open up a shop right across the street and all things were created equal, how would my new company put my old one out of business?
It's
you
incredible.
Come up with some good ideas doing that.
Well, because let me ask you, Scott, you invert all of the forces in your company, all the talent, expertise, and experience. You invert it on yourself, and then all of a sudden, people start thinking completely differently. They can get a lot more objective when you start to look at it that way about themselves and about your operation, and it's invaluable. And not enough businesses are doing that, by the way. It's something we should be talking about far more often.
So, John, we had Brady Schmidt on here yesterday, who's involved in a
lot.
I talk about things, right? He's involved in a lot of things, and a lot of people have a job or a career and then have a side hustle, but his aren't side hustles. They're big.
Nope.
These are big things. Big.
Yep.
JT, no different, by the way.
That's where I'm going. So you're very similar in that. You're not involved in just one or two things. You've got a lot of big things happening. What's your process? Like, how do you identify and evaluate those new opportunities?
Okay. Number one, I think, be honest with yourself. How are you bent? What are you good at? I think sometimes we get outside our makeup, what we're really made to do. Two, there's probably some purpose in this thing, right? Why are you doing what you're doing? For me, I'm bent. I would just say the way my mind works, I try to improve things. It's just, whether it's our house, whether it's the ranch locations, whether it's here in the offices, I'm trying to improve them. So there's a theme of stewardship that I'm operating with at all times. And I just feel like that's the least I can do. So the question is, what is the system? Number two, I would say in every business, I believe there's two different types of voices that I hear. I hear the guy that needs, you always tease me about being long-winded, by the way. So I'm going to talk about that guy for a second. There are people that take a long time to say what they got to say, and they still haven't said it. I have a problem with that, right? So I love the old Dale Carnegieism, say what you got to say, then explain it, right? Say what you got to say, then explain it. But don't take me on a journey, and I still don't understand what you're saying.
Right.
Number two, there's the person who can say it in very few words. And there's no question that person knows what they're talking about. So to me, there's common denominators in each business. So like in contact center, I can tell you what those are. And there's about 3 or 4. I don't need everything else. In agriculture, I can tell you what those are. In commercial real estate, I can tell you what those are. So those are examples of, okay, I don't need all that. Number two is I listen for what I'm not hearing. That tells me more than everything else people tell me. And I tell them this. I say, look, I'm listening for what you're not telling me, because that tells me what you need, or that tells me what you're not thinking. All the other stuff you're telling me, if you see me like nodding my head, I'm like, keep going. I'm already there. I get
that.
Yeah, you understand. I know you do. So that's the second strategy I use. So denominators, third, I would say, know how you've been built. Have a purpose. Number two, know the basic denominators of your space. Number three, so, if you're in outbound calling, how many dials equal a contact? How many conversations equal an appointment? Those are simple denominators. Okay, so what's in between there? Either the list, the quality of the list, or the quality of my communication when I get somebody live. This is very simple, right? And so you can apply this to anything. And then, like I say, the third is, just those adjustments I just talked about a second ago. So
what role would you say, I guess, partnerships or collaboration have when it comes to like driving innovation for you and change?
So I think of partnerships, I think of allied. I think the right partnerships are opportunities. And if I can, I'm going to talk about our brother Arnold Gassita
Yeah.
and Petra
Yeah.
Cares, but not just Petra Cares, Petra, the product company. The distributorship model that Arnold has created, that's allied. And there are people I know, like, and trust that are a part of that. Brady talked about it yesterday, right? Exclusive in Cali, exclusive in Hawaii. And I mean, there are others I know. I don't want to disclose it because that's their business to disclose. But that being said, that's an example of the right stuff. What I would tell you is this, Traver Connect, we have a few here, for those that know Traver Connect and what we do in automotive, that are very key to our growth. And we didn't have that for years, but we had some that reached out. And I'll just say, one of them is J&L. They reached out a couple of years ago, and there was an opportunity to do some stuff together. Bob and I talked, our COO, those that know Bobby Gower, who's a saint. He is.
Mr.
Bobby, I looked at Bobby and said, bro, don't do that to them. He's like, I know. And I told Jamil through a text, I was like, the answer is yes, but not now. We're not ready for you. And we were in the middle of another deal that was allied, and it was just eating our lunch. It was the scope. It was so much farther, so much more expensive to build out. Now today, it's perfect. I mean, it literally is. Just yesterday, I got an IT call with Bob on it. He's like, hey, they are ecstatic. Like we're batting 1,000. I said, great. And I'm not talking about J&L. This is the other one. But my point is, good partnerships, there's honesty, there's timing. So there should be the people element, right? Should line up. It shouldn't just be revenue. All right. You want to think about the beginning, but you also want to think about the backside. In the event that it has to unhook, what does that look like? Right. Is it truly friends for life? And so to me, that's important when we do this. Third, you've heard me say this before, the old Scott, whatever his name is, the programmer at Microsoft, 1980, said perspective is worth about 80 points on the IQ. Guys, if that were true, he made his point, but you could have a 20 IQ. And by the way, Scott, that's very low. Okay, 20 is low. So I'm kidding. So 100, if 100 is an average IQ and you get an extra 80, well, I mean, you're walking in some serious redwoods all by yourself. I mean, that's a bright, bright person. The point was made that a lot of times you're limited by your viewpoint. It's like, you don't have to be smarter. You have to be more experienced. You just got to have a different angle. So that's why I say internally here, I love listening to, what do you need? What's broke? How can we help? And by the way, it does two things. Number one, it says you matter. Your voice, your opinion matters. Number two, it says, we're counting on you. Like, I know I don't see you every day, but you understand, like, we count on you to deliver. So if you have the right allied partnerships, and it doesn't imply, let me make this clear, that does not imply you have an equity position most of the time. Right, Scott? I mean, a lot of people hear
there can be strategic,
like,
sometimes just a strategic alliance.
Yeah, 5 times fast, Scott, if you could, please.
Let me hammer something home, though, because I think this is laying on the table for everyone. If you listen well, if you're surrounded by the right people, you remember that old idiom, the famous idiom, greater or more or better than the sum of its parts, then you get to experience that.
That's right.
It's like the team that lacks standout players, but it's proved to be greater than the sum of its parts. What is that? You don't have to be blank to be wow. So sometimes there's synergy between these allies where it's like, oh my gosh.
You talked about being long-winded and how I kid you about that. When I got off stage, we were at the Business Bourbon and Cigar event, and I get off stage because I was introducing you and trying to give some type of passive-aggressive comment to make sure you keep it within your 5-minute time limit. And I I get off stage and somebody goes to me, "You're the only guy I know that can spend 10 minutes telling some guy to keep it to 5."
It was Jamil. It was Jamil. Thank you, Jamil. And by the way, I have a question. Why do you give me 5 minutes and everybody else 15?
No, I don't. I do not do that. I don't do it. Well, we tell everybody else 5. We tell you 2. And then that way it all works out.
Yes,
and so
I'm excitable. What can I tell you? You know,
I don't want to miss JT's point, Scott. You know, while you're having fun, the rest of us are trying to learn something here.
Some of us get it, Sandy. Some of us get it quicker than others. But go ahead.
Well, listen, when he was talking about the 20 IQ, he kept staring across over at you. I could see the way his eyes were working on the screen. But you know, it reminds me of the book Outliers by Malcolm Gladwell. And he spoke about a guy by the name of Chris Langan who had genius level IQ, but he had an issue with his EQ, right? His emotional, aptitude and abilities. And he lacked what I think he referred to as practical intelligence, right? Intelligence that you could put into use in everyday experiences. And so IQ alone is never going to be what carries any of us to our goals and objectives in life. You have to have a workable IQ, or at least somebody that works for you, like in Scott's case, that has an IQ that's functional when you don't. And sorry, Scott. Anyhow, my point is that if you can't apply your intelligence in a way that's going to be useful for your clients or for your team, it's a wasted resource, right? At the end of the day, you need to be able to, as you said, you have to have perspective, and you have to have the ability to actually process that information and then go and communicate it with brevity and clarity in turn.
I know a guy, Lawrence Houghton, he was co-writer with Jason Jennings for a bunch of Jason's books. And Larry really deserved a lot of credit for a lot of the content. He's really gifted and bright mind. And he's told me multiple stories about he and Jason in Palo Alto with Steve Jobs. And the stories, I don't even feel comfortable telling the stories publicly. But they line up with what you just said, that there was this hubris and this, I'm just saying that's not my style.
Right.
I want to, look, I can't do this alone. And number two, there's some point in the future where all three of us are going to be gone. And it's possible that everything we did is forgotten. All I'm trying to do, you guys know I talk about Keller's every good endeavor.
Yep.
All I'm trying to do, by the grace of God, is do some things, hopefully, that last a long time, touch a lot of people, and hope. And part of that is touching people in the process so they can kind of keep it going too when I am done, when my assignment is complete. And I think that's a good endeavor. So
absolutely. It speaks to Jim Rohn's point about the fact that, he wants every audience that he speaks to walk away with a little piece of him in them, because he'll live on every time somebody speaks his name or shares a philosophy, concept, or idea. And that's, to your point, like that's the legacy. That's the enduring impact that you have on people. We're going to be long gone. I thought about this yesterday. It's so funny you bring it up. We're going to be long gone. We'll be dust, as they say.
Sandy, at a certain point, you start thinking about that more frequently. I think you're there.
Can you tell that we don't have any fun together? These guys, if you don't know these two well, you want to get to know them well, because they are fun off stage.
Only one of us,
let me tell you something.
One of us on the screen dyes his hair. I'm just going to let you know. The rest of us are comfortable.
Well, it's not me. You know that.
I'm shocked that Sandy's dyeing his that color. I don't understand it. And so, but the biggest concern I have is with these screens, the way the three are, I want to be very clear about something. The word sin sits right above my head, and I don't know if that is I'm going to have to change it because I want to be very clear. Part of a bigger word.
Yeah. I also want to note, Scott, that JT and I, when you go to the three separate screens at one time, JT and I can fit inside the screen. You have to go to the big screen to fit inside of the screen. I don't know what's going on.
I noticed that.
Clearly.
You get that, JT?
Yeah,
Right
I
now, it's
did.
like a rose between two thorns. So, I will say, but hey, we have a good, you guys brought up something. You brought it up or touched on it a couple times, which I really want to ask this. We've talked about learning from other industries. We've talked a lot about collaboration and partnerships and what makes that work. Share some insights, John, as to how cross industry collaborations can lead to groundbreaking, like breakthroughs or innovations and positive change.
Yeah. Okay. So a few years ago, Scott had this brainstorm the story is a little longer. They called it the fourth box, and it turned into what
That's
used
not
to be.
my brainstorm. That's Sandy's just as much on that as me. I want to be clear on that.
I'm
Yeah.
going to sandwich you two together.
So I can't be in that conversation.
It was post-COVID. They got together, and this conversation was a catalyst for what today is known as BB&C. These two guys. And to what Scott just said, he's absolutely right. It took both of them. It wasn't just Scott. It took both of them. Scott's running it and driving it today. Sandy has his own companies, and he's chasing that. But what it is an example of cross-country collaboration. And I would just say first, I've told these guys this. I think of it not being there. And I'm going to just mention this. Ted Ings and Fixed Ops Roundtable, I think of Ted in the same way.
That's how I met Dave Boyle. That's how I met Dave.
What they've done has added a connector in our space. Yeah. It's a connector. And if they disappeared tomorrow, there's a void. So I'm going to start there. Number two, Scott's gift, by the way, to do that, some of you might think, oh, I want to do that. Scott's gift is his desire is to put people together. Like he is excited about doing that. He'll tell you that. He's like, I love seeing deals get put together, people get put together as a result. Sandy, his ability to articulate, just operate with wisdom. Scott has a boldness. So together it worked. But if both of these guys, if you asked them 20 years ago, they would tell you, I was in a different headspace then.
Yeah.
I had a different makeup then. That wouldn't have been the time. So what I would say is, based on where you're at, there is tremendous value in collaborating. I told you about a couple of visitors we had in the last 7 days here, 2 different organizations. Thankful to have them in. You got to get outside your box. And that's really the answer that Scott's driving here. And he's right. You got to get outside your box. Sometimes getting out will validate that what you're doing in the box works. Sometimes it's an aha. Quick story. Almost 40 years ago. It was like 1992. I'm in Pittsburgh, PA. Bob Gower's my client. David Lewis, the F&I guy. You guys know David Lewis?
Sure,
okay.
Yeah.
David's a friend. He's a piece of work. He's my friend.
He's Lebanese.
He's incredible. David, so we go to this Chinese restaurant every time I come into town to work in Bob's store. So this time he's like, yeah, I'm going to have David Lewis come. Well, David Lewis was the old F&I guy at Rorick. Did you guys know that, Scott?
I did not know that.
That was the old F&I guy there. Okay. So he's like, I'm going to have this guy, David Lewis. I don't know who David Lewis is. So David, he's like this, I felt like I was on a Seinfeld, And so he's a million miles an hour, and it was kind of invigorating. Well, one of the things I was doing back then is I would charge a day rate for the training, and then it also included my travel. And guys, I was like rubbing sticks together to, flint my way towards a spark, that hopefully I can make flame there was zero margin. It was ridiculous. And the dealers were poor mouthing me early because it was very early. And I mentioned this at the table. I'm outside my box now. This is a vendor that is in the space, and he goes, oh, why do you do that? Just charge them for travel. And I tried to keep a straight face, and I said, what are you talking about? He's, yeah, you just charge them for travel. He goes, you can't do that and have that. And what are your rates? I told him. He's like, and I couldn't wait to get back to the hotel and and I'm like, okay, I think we can actually make this work. It wasn't great, But now it was a breakthrough for me. The concept in my head of what was allowed was wrong. But remember what I said earlier about doubt your doubts and hold loosely your certain things. I was holding it loose enough to be able to listen, hear that, pivot. But getting into these cross-country collaborations is a real estate game. It says physically to your mind, I am open. I am seeking. I am going to go. The old goose and the golden egg, the Stephen Covey principle, right? You know, and the farmer who finds a golden egg and another golden egg, and then each day, and then finally he gets greedy and says, well, I'm just going to cut the goose open and get what? To get all the golden eggs. Well, there's no, bro, that's a golden egg machine, not the golden egg safe, right? So it's putting yourself in positions where you're going to be teachable, and it should be an environment of people that line up, you know, from a value. It's not going to be, every box won't be checked,
right?
But, you know, figure it out, flex a little bit.
Yeah.
I think you make great points. Great points. You know,
I call it keeping your eyes wide open.
Yeah.
Pay attention.
Also having that, you know, we talked about that with Brady yesterday, Scott, where I said you have to have that perfect blend, or not perfect, but you need to have a workable blend of a sense of urgency to get things done on a day in and day out basis, and be willing to listen and make adjustments along the way. And then you've got to have the patience to allow all those things that you're doing to catch up with the results that you seek. Right. And that's a hard thing for us to balance. But I think the point you make about keeping your eyes and ears open to possibility, and I go back to what Scott says about, you know, if you were to try and put your own business out of business, it puts you in a mental state where you have almost a perceived necessity to do those things, John, right? To listen a little bit more intently, to look for the opportunities that aren't so apparent. And I think it can be transformative for you personally, and also obviously in your business.
Teachability is a choice.
Fact.
It's a choice. It's sitting in all of us. And, you know, we all got here on someone's shoulders. We all needed some help, but man, don't stop learning.
Amen.
Don't do it.
Well, you may have just answered this next question. So how do entrepreneurs or business owners, team leaders, how do they avoid the pitfalls that come with trying to innovate and get their teams more innovative, coming up with breakthroughs, things such as that? Because a lot of people resist change.
Yeah.
Right.
Yep. I love that. When I was just getting started, 1986, Michael Gerber wrote a book called The E-Myth. E stood for entrepreneur, the entrepreneur myth. And the moral to this story was basically it was the first business book for me, Scott, Sandy, that stuck. Like, I was like, oh, this is good. In 2000, he rewrote it, called the E-Myth Revisited. So it was kind of updated. Today, Scott, they have an organization, the E-Myth organization, that it is amazing, the work that they do.
I've not read that book.
I'm
a big reader on books. So
it's simple. It's a core book. So the observation from the book is this, and your question is, what are some of the common pitfalls, right, that entrepreneurs and business owners face when trying to innovate? The pitfall that's most obvious to most is most entrepreneurs get stuck in their business instead of being on. Yeah. So if we're bakers and everybody says, man, you make the best pie, you make the best pizza, whatever, and we decide to open a pizza shop, well, the thing is now you're also a landlord. Now you're also HR. Now you're also accounting, of which none you're very good at, right? And all require time. And so the idea of getting back on, and I'll tell you, my team here, I try and use analogies and metaphors that A, relax them, B, allow their minds to see things illustrated, and they see them for the concept that they are. And I say, look, you're scuba diving right now. You need to water ski. You know, we'll scuba dive later. Too deep, man. You know, or, hey, dude, you got to put the snorkel stuff on. You got to go under. You got to figure this out. And Scott, I'm telling you, they know exactly what I'm saying. It's like, okay, he's not mad at me. I'm not mad at you. I'm just saying your approach right now is to this or not this. So I'm not saying it's bad to be in your business. I think I opened talking about what we said yesterday in our executive committee meeting about if we were hired to run the business today, what would we do? And what we said was we would go through the basic training program and get on the phones, like that, because we would learn what the business needs. So in versus on, there's a big mistake made there. Being an entrepreneur, I think also I'd just add, it's going to require more than just that gift. And so, like I said, a baker's got to be good at more than just baking. Drucker, what you'll find though, as you grow this stuff out, your teams will occasionally resist you.
Oh, yeah.
Okay. When you try and innovate. Drucker said something else that I love, and I've always looked for this. Last year, in both of your businesses, I challenge you guys to do this, and anybody listening, ask yourself, what was last year's surprise? Don't tell me, but just think about it and say, what was last year's surprise? And then what you'll find is last year's surprise is this year's opportunity. And this is a guy that he only lived, 103 years. You know what I mean? He was a guy, there's some patterns the dumbest person in the world could see, and he was uber bright. And he saw, and those are the things you're learning. Now listen, here's the kicker. When you introduce that opportunity and you tie it to the surprise, your team will resist the opportunity. He said it's almost 100%. Their initial response is common to resist it. So you go, well, what if my team does? Congratulations, you're normal. Now get to work. Figure it out. So now you got to sell the idea. Now you have to get them outside their box. Now you have to the big question should be the 5 Drucker questions. What is our mission? What is our mission? What are we doing? Why are we doing this? Why do we do what we do? Number 2, who's our customer? Every business has more than one. They have a primary customer and they have a secondary customer.
Right.
Every business does. A high school, a grade school principal has got a student. That's their primary customer. But they got parents, they got the board, they got city council, they got teachers. And any of those secondary can fire them, by the way. Get them fired. So stay with me. So what is our mission? Who's our customer? Here's the big one. This is how you know what to do. What do they value? What do they value? Well, how do I know that? Ask, listen. Okay, good. What do they value? Here's the next one. Real talk. You ready? How are we doing? That's the old Admiral Stockdale. Who am I? What am I doing here? It's like right there in your face. How are we doing? Okay. Well, we kind of suck at this right now. Okay. That's where we're at. Or we're awesome compared to who? Right? Compared to what? Okay. So what is our mission? Who's our customer? What do they value? How are we doing? And here's the big one. What's our plan? So to me, once you figure out the change, you go to those 5. We could do a deal just on that. But
we could have used you last night in the Me Plus Ultra expert speaker session, because you could have brought up some of those scenarios. We had a great expert speaker on, Johnny Holston. He specializes in clarifying, making speaking in clarity, and especially in big moments, right? And so at the end, it was a lot about, everyone thinks about a clear message from Donald Miller in terms of, attracting clients. Well, that's one aspect. You've also got visions, and you've got to do a similar strategy when you're talking to your team. And so a lot of what you're talking about, it would have been a great discussion with you and Johnny last night. That would have been phenomenal.
Well, John, Scott, I'm going to reference the conversation you and I had right after that session for Me Plus Ultra. By the way, shameless plug for Me Plus Ultra. If you're not a member, you need to be going to meplusultra.com and getting more information, because it is high value experiences 100%. Every month, like high value experience, high value community, etc. But the question that John Batone of Dynatron asked was, how do you address the challenge when your prospective client doesn't know that they have a problem that you solve for? Okay. And Scott, I texted you and said, I have an answer for that question, and I'll talk to you offline, which we did. And JT just referenced it. And it's a technique. And the difference between pressure and persuasion in communication or negotiation is one word. It's technique. It's how we do what we do. It's how we say what we say. Okay. And John referenced the utilization of metaphors and analogies to get people outside of themselves or outside of the situation that you're looking to either take advantage of and leverage or solve for, so that they look at it more objectively. And John, that's such a great point. I'm so glad you brought it up, because it's a technique that we teach all the time that is so wildly effective, because people will learn more through a simple story, an analogy, or a metaphor than they ever will with facts and figures.
Facts tell, stories sell.
Amen to that.
Mm-hmm.
Amen.
Good way to say it. Very good way to say it.
Mm-hmm.
All right. So two final things. Give us your best learning lesson. Every successful entrepreneur learns when there's a setback or a failure, right? I mean, what's the best learning lesson you've ever had from any specific setback?
Okay, so I had Traver Technologies, right? Sold to ADP, stayed at ADP 10 years. I had bought a company earlier, XPS, and then started Third Day Ranch in 04. So I get to 2010, I'm leaving ADP, start Traver Connect. So I've been doing automotive for 20 plus years. I know a lot about customer relationship, experience, BDC. So I'm walking with all that. And a lot of the assumptions when I started Traver Connect, I walked into this new company, they were no longer valid, but I didn't know that. Scheduled appointment rates from sales to service were very different. The cell phone in 07 had shifted how customers interacted, with the store and even communicated. Outbound calling rules. Not only were the rules changing, but the customer was starting to Heisman the call. Service schedulers, they were struggling. I mean, X time wasn't the X time today in 2010 or 2011, even what it is today in 2014. And they were being created. There were competitors, Time Highway, et cetera. All that stuff, guys, that cost me time and money. The lesson, I've said it a few times today, it's that Kellerism, that Tim Kellerism, doubt your doubts. So I just think you stay fluid, you hold some of these trends loosely. Seriously, I say that to you as a friend. That's how you stay on the front end of it. Stay teachable, ask good questions, questions. And when you do, hand the mic back, please. Listen. I mean, you want to receive the fastball, right? And then listen with that intent to understand. And usually my best listening exchanges, if I'm on the receiving end, I'm going to say to you, okay, that's helpful. Can I ask you a question? Like, how far back should I go when I'm looking for that? Like, I'm going to ask you a follow-up question, right?
Yeah.
But a lot of people do, you know what? That's so true for me. There's a big difference.
Yep.
You're telling, bro, open. If you're trying to lift more, there's a progressive way to do it. Yep. If you're trying to save more, compounding is going to be a principle you're going to want to know something about. Learning is the same, but you got to let it in, the old gatekeeper here, right?
And John, I think you gave us a great roadmap. You talk about, what is my mission? Who is my customer? What do they value? How are we doing? And then what is the plan? Like, I think having that structure, you follow that structure or a structure very purposefully every time you communicate. That's something I've noticed about you from the first time that we sat down. The way that you communicate is with very intentional purpose, and it's all driven by asking probing, provocative, smart, relevant questions. And it's something I admire about you, because you do it better than anybody else I know.
Oh, yeah.
Anybody.
Thank you, buddy. I want to tell you something, though, about that. When I was back in the 90s, when I was writing some of our training workbooks, one of the communication principles I taught was called pace lead. And it was matching and mirroring, Scott, essentially.
Yep.
But matching and mirroring is useless unless eventually you lead. So I built a pyramid, and level one was pace, 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 lead, and then pace, pace, lead, pace, lead, lead. So, and I would teach it in a way where I was showing our groups, our managers that were coming to BD boot camp in Houston for Traver Tech. I was showing them, this is what you guys do, is you go right to level 4 and you wonder why you're not getting anything back.
Right.
Because you haven't made any deposits. A pace is like an emotional deposit. So if you think about it, and I even put money on it, I said, think of it as 25 cents. So pace is 75 cents, 25, 25, 25. And a withdrawal is 50. So technically you could withdraw and still have 25 cents left. And so I would just show them mentally, this is how you adjust. But what I was really doing is I was causing them to slow down and assess what's going on. So fast forward, I have all these instructors, trainers, and oh, boss, man, last week I was in Baltimore, man, I paced my way to an upgrade. Okay, I didn't like that. I don't like that. So then I went back to the principle. So my point to you is, these are principles for me to hopefully connect, hopefully make a difference, but they're loose. It's not like I'm on script. It's not like a technique. And anybody that runs with me here, they'll tell you that. It's just not. But it's I feel there is a way to communicate, and
it's very natural for you, JT. Like I don't ever feel like that. I don't ever feel like it is structured. I just happen to notice it in intonation and then the flow of a conversation, because I'm a student of it. I always look at how people communicate. And so I understand what you're saying. I think what you're telling us is not to just read off of a list of questions. It's like have a fundamental conceptual understanding of what you're doing versus reading off of a script. Is that the point you're making?
Yes, there's a guide, there's rules of engagement, there's some principles here, but the rule of thumb that you cannot go wrong with is he or she that's most flexible wins.
The reality is you're good question. You ask good questions because you have a sincere interest in the person you talk to. You don't go at it for what you're going to gain. And I think it comes from that intent.
I'm trying. I'm not perfect, but I'm trying.
At least that's why it comes naturally to you, right?
I'm trying.
I think.
Well,
So
JP, let's use the same cadence. Try, succeed. Try, succeed. Try, succeed. Like that's
good point, Sandy. So what excites you most about where you're at in business right now?
Probably Whoville. You guys know what Whoville is?
I mean, I know from Cindy Lou Who.
Okay, let me tell you a story.
The Grinch.
Okay, so I'm with Kevin Smith, Dynatron. Kevin's been a friend of mine for 15 years.
Great guy.
We're at BB&C in Arizona, and they're growing like gangbusters. And it's an incredible Lee Silver, Les Silver, incredible team. James Grogan. Anyway, I was like, bro, what the heck is going on? And he's like, Who, man? We're just doing Who. And I said, okay, talk to me. Because you remember the book Who, 2007? Yeah. Jeff Smart, Randy Street. Yeah. We got scorecards. We got clarity. We got people in the right role. And it's kind of a combination of Jim Collins, Good to Great, where you got the right people on the bus, right people in the right seat. But it's the process for doing it. And I'm like, man, okay. So what Whoville is, and I call it Whoville. It's not called Whoville in the book. I call it Whoville because it's Dr. Seuss. It makes it fun. But it really is a picture of getting the right people in the right seats in the businesses. We all the businesses will always have issues. But what I'm most excited about is like the team that I see, and I can already see fruit like coming in, and they're figuring it out. There's some things I can teach, and there are some things they have to learn. And when you got the right people, then you got the human organization. The easiest part is the business process. It's the easiest part. Yeah, here, you got to have the right people. One of the things I learned from that book is I have a COO for XPS, Jennifer Downer, and she's an absolute incredible human being, incredible leader. Okay, so about a year plus ago, I'm talking to a guy in the space who owns a bunch of properties, and he's a stud. Lonnie Bickford. And so I'm like, brother, I got to ask you a question. Who should I be talking to? Who should I be talking to that could help us lead here? That has self-storage background, been there, done that, led people. I don't have any integrity issues. He's like, you need to be talking to Jennifer Downer. So God bless Indeed. Okay. I think that's a wonderful place to find resumes. Okay. But when I call you guys and I ask you that question, just know what I'm asking. Like, and I will call you. There are going to be times. And so what you'll find is that the best fits are found through these, everything we just talked about for an hour and a half, right? Are found through, just this network and be able to say, hey, look, I need somebody to lead this. Who do I need to be talking to? We have in-house recruiting in both companies, full-time people, and that's like fourth on the list. It's like 25% effective in the book. The most effective is what I just shared with you. That's like the JT Cliff Note version, 3 sentences, in spite of the fact that Scott says I'm long-winded. So there you go.
What has to happen for you to say it's effective? Let's make sure we define that for everybody.
Yeah. Sustainable growth. We have operating plans that we lay out each year based on historicals, based on what's happening. There's variable bonuses tied to it, that they can earn monthly, they earn annually. They're co-owners in this deal. And so I want them to win. Like Brady said yesterday, I would like to overcompensate wherever we can. I want to make this easy for them to go, I'm home. I'm home. Right. They got my back. Now let me get after. I have to be after something because we're created to create. That's part of okay. So let's give them a place, a sandbox where they can get after it and they're part of something that is meaningful, has longevity, has impact, all that. So I'm excited about Whoville. There's a lot of the right people in the house.
Amen.
So if someone wants to get a hold of you, John, what's the best way?
Shine a giant JT into the sky. Just
Hey, just reach out, man. Traver at xpsusa.com, Traver at traverconnect.com. Hit me on LinkedIn. Any of those work.
And what company should they look at if they want to get the best understanding of who you are and is it Traver Connect or is it
the company he's keeping right now on the screen, Scott? Come on.
Yeah, man, this group right here. You know what I do? I go to LinkedIn because that'll give them kind of a macro on the the B2B world out there or B2B2C. There's other stuff that's not in that space, but commercial investment stuff like that. But yeah, that would be it. That'd probably be great. Hey, I just got to praise you too. You're rare. You guys are really rare, and I love you both. And I know you guys know I mean it. So I'm just so thankful for you guys. And I know there's other guys and gals, Lori Halter. People we're fortunate to have in our circle. Thanks for what you guys are doing, for real.
Thank you, buddy.
I can honestly say when Sandy and I started just kind of coming up with all we wanted to do was create an event, and it's morphed into a mastermind group in this community, but we just want to create an event that was different, that offered good value. And it's not us. So you're thanking us and we appreciate it. But quite honestly, it's all the people, in this, they're the stars of this whole thing. They're the reason that it's become what it is. And so it's almost like, I think Brady said it yesterday, Sandy, if you're doing the right things, you're going to attract people like that, right? It's like a magnet. And so I just think surrounding yourself with the right people, I know we all agree to that, and pound that drum. So
somebody had to lead. Somebody had to lead.
Well, I appreciate it. And then I know Sandy and I, we look back on those days and it's been a lot of fun along the way.
Yeah. It born from necessity, JT, to our point before. It was born in April of 2020 when we were looking at each other going, I'm getting questions left and right and I don't have the answers. And so we need to put our heads together. And then we realized that, Scott and I were showing up a few dollars short in the IQ department, just the two of us. So we brought Jamil in. And then we said, we need to bring in perspective from the outside. And it grew from there. And to Scott's point, every single person that has touched Fourth Box or Business Bourbon and Cigars or Me Plus Ultra or our own lives and businesses makes this what it is and how rewarding it's become for certainly Scott and I. and our businesses and our families and the people that we work with. My right-hand guy, Ron Marvo, for sure.
Ronnie.
Because of people like you. Like this community is an incredible example of what happens when like-minded people get together to share a common purpose of helping each other get better.
Yeah.
That old proverb, there's wisdom in the counsel of many.
Amen.
Yes.
Amen.
Men in black. Thanks for joining us. If you're
I just wear this because it makes me look in better shape when I wear black.
We got to hide the midsection.
If it works, man.
I want to highlight my abs, Scott.
That's right. I know. Huge thank you to our guest, John Traver, good friend, and our guest host, good friend as well, Sandy Cerami.
The man.
For joining us today. Always, anytime we get these guys together, it's always about sharing over-the-top, invaluable wisdom, insights. If you want to get a hold of John, best way to do it, John Traver, go to LinkedIn, because like he said, that goes, you'll get a good grasp of all the different things he's involved in, and he's very responsive on there. You could do the same as well for Sandy, but you can also visit sandycerami.com or email him at sandy@sandycerami.com. If you found this episode inspiring and informative, be sure you subscribe to the Me Plus Ultra Network on YouTube, and follow us on all the major social media platforms. So together, let's continue driving positive change and innovation in the world of business. Until next time, keep innovating and keep making a difference. Thank you all. Thank you.
Thank you, guys. Thank you, JT.